retired metalhead weatherman here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. So in this one, we already know what the deal is. We know that there is a moderate risk of severe storms today, which includes an increased damaging wind threat and a tornado threat as of now. Because when I woke up this morning, I saw something else. So, okay, we have the moderate risk here, right? And when we go to the moderate risk, we have the hatched risk for damaging winds at 45% area. Hail threats remaining has dropped actually to 15% now, but look what's happened with the tornado threat. Small little pocket right here where we've gone up to the enhanced risk level, which is 10%. And you even see those tiny little area where there's a hatched risk too, which means the potential for EF2 to EF5 tornadoes possible. So we're going to have to watch this area very closely as well as the entire area right here. So this is going to be a pretty active day from the looks of it here. I will be live streaming this, by the way, anyone that's interested. I'm going to give it a shot. Hopefully it goes well. Hopefully you guys stop by and say hello. I'm not asking for much. Feel free to watch if you want to. It's probably going to be a little awkward at first because I've never done this before. There's a big learning curve behind it, but we'll get through it the best we can. That being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the parameters that have changed and also get an idea of what kind of storm modes we could be dealing with early in the day. So we're going to start out with the low-level jet here, if this thing will behave. And what we'll do here is jump ahead to about probably 1819Z. We can already start to see a maximum starting to develop over our area of interest. We're already at that magical number of about 40 knots. And this is right before the time the storm starts to fire. Storms will start to fire. And as we go to 21Z, which is a couple hours from then, things really start to pick up over this region. I think this is partially why the concern is there for a stronger tornado over this region, because now we're starting to get into those higher, much stronger maximums with the low-level jet. This, as the low pressure starts to move closer, this wind maximum starts to really increase, especially as we head towards sunset, because around that time, that's when the low-level jet really starts to strengthen. So we're starting to get areas up to about 50 knots plus easily. Some areas starting to reach 60, and this is when our damaging wind threat really starts to take off here. And look how strong this maximum gets as we continue to go forward here. This is going to persist as we head into Missouri in the overnight hours here. So this damaging wind threat will remain through a good portion of the evening hours. There's also still going to be a tornado threat, although not as significant, as we'll mainly be looking at a linear type event begin to take shape here, even as indicated on the low-level jet almost. So as we roll forward, there is one condition with that tornado threat. We already know the surface temperatures over this area are going to be more than sufficient, but it's the moisture return that's the question here for this region. It was a conditional threat as of yesterday evening, but it looks like there's an increasing amount of confidence over this area now that we'll have dew points that are just sufficient enough to really promote a few discrete cells ahead of that main line. And you can see that here as indicated with these 60-degree dew points. We're hitting about 62 here, so it sounds about right. And when we look at the hordeograph here, definitely a great indicator of that. Look at the low-level curve here and the helicity that we get from this as well. The air temperature is sufficient enough at 64 degrees. We have very good CAPE available, and then on top of that, there is a classic supercell indicator here as well. So with all those parameters together, easy to see why this ends up having a heightened tornado threat with this. In fact, when we look at the significant tornado parameter, which we'll look at in full across this map in a minute, we can clearly see that there is a heightened probability of EF2 tornadoes. I'd say on the STP, we're looking at maybe a 3.5, close to a 4. There could be a pocket around here that might be actually a little bit higher, that might have a higher value than that. But that's just an idea of what we're dealing with here. Also, when you look at the wind barbs, it's pretty easy to see why we're concerned, because there's plenty of not just speed shear, but directional shear as well. These barbs are progressively changing direction with height. So this is exactly what you would look for when you're looking for a tornado threat. You want to have both speed and directional shear, idealistically. You can get a tornado with only one, but with both, that threat does definitely go up. So as this line of storms develops, it gets into much more moist air, especially over Oklahoma, which is why I think those storms are going to last the longest out of the group. Towards southern Texas, I mean, it's going to be moist, but for the most part, the forcing is going to be a little bit too far to the north for you guys. So you might get some showers and thunderstorms over towards this region, but the severe threat's going to be a lot lower. But as this goes forward, we'll then eventually have to watch this region over here towards the Tennessee Valley and southeast even as well for tomorrow's threat. But we'll get into that in a video probably tomorrow morning. That being said, let's now go ahead and take a look at some other components here. We're going to start out by looking at the Cape values, which we know are somewhat explosive over this region right now. But there's also the capping inversion that we'll have to keep an eye on too, because this will limit storms from firing. These storms fire too early, this will mitigate the severe threat. If that cap doesn't break at all, we won't get a severe threat. So we're dancing on a fine line here, but I do think that cap does eventually break because we do have that frontal set up along with the dry line, which is going to end up lifting that cap as we get later into the evening. So that being said, we can already see the capes are pretty well charged up across this region, and that's again why we're thinking there's a tornado threat earlier in the evening, especially between the Texas-Oklahoma line towards the panhandle of Texas particularly. Again, cape values, pretty impressive. Helicity's there. Everything that you would look for in a tornado event, although not a huge tornado outbreak, it's there in the early part of the day. Again, how these storms will end up firing is going to be a key component behind everything. Watch what happens to the Cape as we get later into the evening. A lot of it just starts to fade because we've lost most of our daytime heating by this point, and then we'll see it refire again tomorrow. It's going to be a later video. So the next thing we'll be looking at here is the capping inversion, and it's important to talk about this kind of thing because this is going to be a big key point in our severe threat as well. So as we drag this down here, look what happens. It's a pretty strong cap in the early part of the evening, around 21Z, where those dew points are really starting to take off here. Storms could honestly already start to fire by this point, but that cap starts to develop here, and this does start to keep those storms a little bit discreet as well. Because what will end up happening is if the cap breaks too quickly, these storms will fire up rapidly, and as a result, we'll get that line of storms a lot faster. But what ends up happening a lot of times with the capping inversion will be that you will get small holes in it. Like if you were to be right around here, you would start to see holes develop in the cap, and in those holes is where those severe thunderstorms would start to develop. And there's plenty of cases with big tornadoes that have happened. A great example actually would be the Mayfield tornado. But that being said, that's exactly what ends up happening. You do see a couple of holes here and there where the capping inversion gets weak, and we end up seeing those storms fire. And then from that point onward, we're off to the races. So we already have an idea of what to expect there. It's pretty high confidence in it at this point. Another thing to look at, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is the significant tornado parameter. We do get some pretty high values over here too. We're getting up to 3s. There's probably a section over here where we're getting to 4s. Now we're staying just below it, but it's still pretty it still looks pretty wild right here too. Oh, wait a minute, hang on a second. This is the effective layer significant tornado parameter, and we're getting at 5 now, and that shows a lot of potential here too. And this could also be within that line of storms. No, this is actually discrete. I didn't get to take a look at the hordeograph, but yeah, crazy curvature right there. So this could have a nasty little tornado threat with it. Some of these could be strong in the early part of this. So definitely going to be a lot to watch once these storms do start to fire. It's still conditional, but have pretty high confidence that there's a chance. And then again, we'll We'll look more so towards tomorrow, starting in the morning. Last thing to look at here will end up being the reflectivity pattern. So we're going to go ahead and look at the composite. This is usually how you end up getting a good idea of what the storm mode will be. This is, of course, prone to changing. But from what I see here, gaps in place, not really a whole lot going on in the early part of the day. But look what happens as we get towards about, I'd say, 4 or 5 o'clock. That's when these storms will start to fire. I'll actually do a vote to ask you guys when I should start the stream. Of course, since I'm new to this, I want to try to get a little bit ahead of these storms so that way we can track them properly. Plus, there's a couple other things I want to try to see if I can add on to the stream without breaking my computer, of course. But yeah, as we get towards OZ, that's when we start to see this line of discrete cells form, and then eventually this turns linear as we get into the overnight hours. By O3Z, which would probably be about 10, 11 o'clock, these storms are formed into a full-on line. There are kidney beans in here, so there are plenty of embedded supercells. So again, tornado threat is not zero even when this becomes a full-on squall line here. So keep an eye out for that. Not to mention, I've mentioned it before, damaging winds can still do the same kind of damage as a small tornado, but on a much wider scale as far as impacts are concerned. So let's keep that in mind too as we're going through this event tonight. And this will persist, of course, into the overnight, starting the weekend as we head into the early morning hours of Monday. And then we could see some resurgence Tuesday or Monday afternoon for the southeast. So that's all I got for this video here. It's a quick update. Of course, all of you in this region are familiar with this kind of weather, so I expect you to be weather aware. I expect you to already have your course of action plan should a warning get issued, and we'll just go from there. I know it's February, it's a little weird, but no time like the present to get ready for a severe season. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Be sure to tune in, even if it's just for a couple of seconds on the live stream today. So, and hopefully it's successful and we'll do many more after that. But anyways, enough rambling from me. This has been Tired Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys this afternoon. Till then, you take care, stay safe and weather aware, and have a good day.